Good afternoon, everyone. So after starting working with Ruby, I decided that one of my main objectives in life now is helping people do better code and have more free time. So with that in mind, we need to take care of our code, and there is no magic trick for it. And one of the best books that I've read that I read in the subject is Refactoring from Martin Fowler. It's not Ruby specific, and after I read that, I decided that I wanted to talk about it for the Ruby community. There are many different refactoring patterns in many languages, and sometimes people call them with different names. I like to use the names from the Martin Fowler book because they made sense for me. They made sense for many languages, not specific for anyone. For example, you can change a function declaration, or you can collapse your hierarchy when you have a superclass that shouldn't be a superclass of that class, or more than one. You can extract a module, combine many functions in a module in Ruby. Same thing, you can combine a lot of functions in a big class to create another class, or you can decompose a conditional. The names are pretty self-explanatory. The only refactoring that I feel the need for help every time that I need to use is extract method, because to do it in a productive way, I always feel the need to use an IDE that I don't usually have when working with Ruby. But I found out that there is a plugin for Vim and one for Sublime Code that helps with that. The Vim plugin is a lot better, but both work. Besides that, you just basically copy, paste, and change variables. And that's it for most of the refactoring. But the hard thing is to remember when to do things and learn to identify the problems. And people started using the name code smells a few years ago to help identify what are the problems in our code. And I think the idea is cool, so we'll start with the smell of adventure. That is really good when you come to a marvelous country as Thailand with beauties and beaches, but not when you look at your code. You check a new code base and you see no tests in it, and you think the people that wrote that should love adventure because something will break. There are other less risk things. For example, a simple case statement without an else can break your code in half a year. I have a sample of that in my company. We had an enumeration that was used to define a tag type, and all the current values were in the case that was used to describe it with a human friendly name. 6 months later, a reporter asked for a new tag type. We added an item to the enum. Nobody remembered to increase the test case, to add the test case with that. And the we had a lot of unknown and new values exploding because there was no else in the case that covered that. So that is one sample, and things, just quick comment, if you have no tests, stop thinking of refactoring and do tests because you won't be able to do anything without. To start, I want to list a few good practices for refactoring. After you complete the refactoring, all your tests should still be passing, otherwise you broke something. Refactoring, by definition, shouldn't change the behavior. You are improving the code and keeping everything working as before, but sometimes faster. In not critical scenarios, you might change a class that's exposed as an API, but that's not the ideal case. Factoring is about code quality, and you should separate time for it there in your daily work, weekly, every iteration. You should separate time for it, because if you take too long to refactor and improve your code, it will cost you a lot more later. Time saved to improve code quality will save your vacation time too, and reduce the number of bugs. And I think since everyone likes to take time off, it's a good practice to take care of your code. And as a golden rule, anything that's not simply improving the code that the class that you are working on now should be in its own pull request. Otherwise, the people that are reviewing your code will try to kill you. Instead of reviewing 100 lines of feature-related code, they will be reviewing 5,000 changed lines because you decided to refactor code while developing the new feature. That's not really good. Exception for that, small refactorings. Always do them and always leave the code that you are touching better than when you find it. So some things are really simple, but they smell like it can explode. You are looking at a code and there is a broken chain of nil safe calls in Ruby. You know it's working, the tests are passing, but it will break in some time. And also when you see a chain of 3 or 4 ternary operators, it's pretty possible that you forgot one of the outcomes of that, that rule, and it always look at me like it can explode. There are also a lot of things that just don't feel right. This image is just for Latin Americans, I think. It references a children show that passes there a few years ago. But the idea is, if you are looking at Ruby code, you don't expect to see camel case variables. You don't expect parentheses in conditional expressions. You expect Ruby code to look like Ruby code. And for these first scenarios, there are a few tools that will help you a lot, that will make your life a lot easier, and that can fix a few of these things by itself. For example, RubyConfTH, that my suggestion is always run Robocop before committing. It will verify your code. Sometimes I let it do quick fixes before anything automatically when I save files before committing. And if you are using JavaScript too, you can use lint staged to run it automatically before committing anything. There are other smells that are really good if you are in an Italian restaurant, but if you look at your code and you think it looks like spaghetti, you really need to stop and fix something before it breaks. Spaghetti code is usually that code that you look, it doesn't look good, and it has a lot of problems, and sometimes you have no idea how it's working. And that's the worst scenario. But in best case scenario, you'll have some classes that are handling too many responsibilities, methods that are too big, that are doing too much things. You might have an incomplete class library that you are extending in your code and shouldn't be. Circular dependencies. There are some times with spaghetti code that you change a line in one part of the code and another part explodes without any reason. For example, like the Emacs code, where there is a warning: if you think you know what you're doing here, you don't touch it. That's probably a good sample of a very well-tested spaghetti code. One of the big culprits of spaghetti code is a whale class that usually is one or many classes in your code that are huge, have 500, 1,000 lines, and that's a clear pointer that the class is doing a lot of things that it should not be doing. Whale class usually is traveling together with dolphin methods. They are smaller than the whale class, but they are really big methods. They usually have high cyclomatic complexity, and most of the times they can be simplified with some effort. And to solve these scenarios, you'll usually work with these refactorings. For the whale class, if you have more than one, they probably have some shared code that can be used. You can extract a superclass and share that superclass with more than one classes. Or if the hierarchy is not good, you can collapse the hierarchy and remove one or two classes from the hierarchy. And then if the class is still, you feel that it should be doing that, you can combine a few of the functions in a module and include the module in the class. It will be easier to test. You can test the module separately and use the class. The code will be cleaner and easier to read. Then you'll do a lot of move function. You can move the methods to the new superclass, to the new module. You'll extract method a lot to reduce the size of and the complexity of the dolphin methods. You extract variables to make the code simpler. Sometimes you have big parts of more than one method that are simply replaced. If you replace them by variables, you can extract a method and share the code between a lot of methods in the class. This usually happens when they are close to each other with small differences. Sometimes to make it easier to share code, you will inline variable instead of extract it. And to make the code cleaner, you'll do a lot of rename method, class, variable to make to use meaningful names for what you are doing. And I love fruit salads. I come from another country that have a lot of fruits, but sometimes you feel like your code it has too much information, like a fruit salad that sometimes have too many fruits. You can look at a class that has too many instance variables, and that will make it too error prone. If you change in one point variable, it will break another. A class with too many methods, you can solve that by extracting a module. A method with too many arguments, you'll change that, making a value object to pass to that method, or like we do a lot in Ruby, simply passing a hash with possible values. It will be easier to test. You can, these are usually some parameters will be used for one thing and some for another, and you can split in smaller methods inside that one and test each one individually. And this will make everything look cleaner. And some things are just like when you smell ice, it smells like nothing. There are a lot of things in your code that are usually not meant to be there. Unneeded comments like remove item. This code removes an item. It's a lot better to add comments to explain the business reason to do that, instead of trying to, if you need to explain in a comment what a method is doing, you usually need to improve the names of the methods, the class. But comments explaining the business reason for that are really useful. I've seen a lot of libraries. There is an NPM module to compare true with itself. I hope it's a joke, but I've seen it dependent on a lot of places. And there are a lot of things that will cause problems. For example, if you have a method with 5 or 6 return statements in there. Sometimes they are useless, like when you have a case statement and have a return on each line. In Ruby, they are not needed. But sometimes they are simply creating a lot of exit points in a method. And if you have a lot of exit points in a method, you should break that in smaller methods. You should improve the logic there, add some guard conditions in the beginning of the methods or something like that, because a lot of a method with more than 1 or 2 exit points will be a lot more error prone than something that the logic is simple and linear. As I was suggesting, creating value objects in Ruby, we don't use that a lot sometimes. You can just use a hash or create a struct when you need a value object. You don't need to define a class with a lot of gets and sets for variables. because it doesn't really look like Ruby. iStruct will create a class like that for you. And now we have another, I forgot the name, that will create a constant that just can be read. And all of these things should be simply removed because they feel like nothing in your code. And there are some situations where you look at the code and you feel claustrophobic or feel like it should be easy to do something. That happens a lot when you have spaghetti code or big classes, or one class that your entire application ecosystem depends on that. I did that a few months ago with some code that was in the company from before I got there. There was a user class that was copied for 5 different applications, the same class, and everything that needed to be changed in the user class, we had to change 5 different applications. That's one case where the best scenario would be to extract it to a separate service and share it to everyone. There are other scenarios where to do something you need to change many points in your code, and it starts to increase in complexity and create more problems than it would solve. And for Rails, we have a few classic error pointers. When you have fat controllers and thin models, meaning that your controllers have a lot of code that is database related, or your controller methods have 50, 60, 100 lines. That usually means that the controller is doing a lot of things that should be in the model. But the models also shouldn't be too fat. For example, if you have a song model and the model suddenly starts to have methods to convert, the idea of the model was to have an ID, a name, and categories, and the pointer to file name, and then you look a month later, there are methods to convert that file to WAV, to MP3, to this is usually a bad thing. Converting files shouldn't be in the model. You should be using a common class for that, a separated library. It's a fat model. That's the idea in Rails. Isn't something that should be doing everything. The idea is that all the database related code would be in the model, but the controller should simply receive parameters, pass to the model, get data, pass to the view. It will make testing easier and split responsibilities. And there are some things that simply smells like they are wrong. If you are using modules in your Rails migrations, in your probably near future, when you change that model, if you need to reapply the migrations in a different database, everything will break. It happened to me more times than I would like to assume. Migrations without a down method, you can't roll back anything that you did, or that change model and update data at the same time. are clear pointers that you'll have problems in the near future. And sometimes some things you'll see and think that help could be a good thing there. If you have views with a lot of query logic, or your views have a lot of repeated code, you can, or really complex code, you can use the Rails structure and export that complex code from your view to a view helper, and that will make your views cleaner, and will make your testing your views, testing your code a lot easier. And quick summary to what I was doing. This resumes mostly everything that I said. RubyCop or similar tools are your friend. If you automate using them, your code will automatically be better, and you'll have a lot of warnings pointing you to things that you should improve. Refactoring should be separated from feature implementation and should use their separate pull request. It will make life of the people that are reviewing your code a lot easier. To organize class hierarchies, use struct superclass, struct module, struct class, and move function. To organize method bodies, struct method, struct variable, inline variable. Remove dev code, simply delete it. RubyCop complains a lot about it. Kill anything that indicates a circular dependency. Circular dependencies will crash your application sometime when you need to upgrade something. Controllers should be thin. Models should be strong but not fat. Pay attention to the migration code. Use view helpers wisely. Don't add query code to your views. And cleaner code has less bugs and increase your vacation and free time. And that was it. Thank you for your attention. And if you want to, my contact information, it's in the QR code.